Before I introduce the speaker, I'd just like to give a quick brief intro into why we chose this event. The title of the event is The Hope, Vision and Victory of our beloved Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his beloved companions. Just as a quick reality check, we live in a time where the reality for the Muslims is quite bleak and it's quite saddening. Whether it be in the Muslim lands where we're being bombed, killed, raped, tortured, murdered, whether it be here in the West where it's a battle of ideas and they want to demonize us, and the rise of Islamophobia is at its greatest high in a sense. There seems to be many issues for us Muslims facing all around the world. And at these times it can be easy to lose sight and lose hope in Allah's victory and Allah's promise. But it's important at the same time to address these matters and what's the correct way to view these issues. So without delaying it any further, inshallah, I want to introduce Brother Yahya Nisbet to give us his presentation on this topic, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. قال الله في القرآن الكريم بعد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, as we well know, Allah, He wrote or He prescribed or He commanded fasting upon you as He commanded it upon those before you, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, in order that you may gain taqwa. This is said to be the hikmah, this is the maqsad, this is what we are trying to achieve from our fasting. So if we fast at all, inshallah, we will gain this taqwa at the end of it. And so that we must always bear this in mind, because this is the driving force, this is something that we are aiming at. And this is something we will make sure, whenever you aim at something, you make sure you achieve it. You do as best as you can. And the way to achieve it is taqwa. I'm going to come back to this later, inshallah. But we are fasting, this is Ramadan, so this is the month in which we are aiming to walk out of this month, inshallah, with taqwa. Or if we don't make it to the end of the month, at least we increase in taqwa during this month. But just to be clear with the meaning of taqwa, many of the Sahaba, they said, it is al-khawf min al-jalil, wal-amalu bit-tanzil, wa-isti'tad li yawm al-rahil. They gave a definition or a kind of an explanation of the meaning of taqwa. It is khawf min al-jalil, it is fearing, being afraid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, al-jalil. It is al-amalu bit-tanzil, it is acting according to what was sent down, i.e. the guidance, the revelation. وَاسْتِعْدَادِ لِيَوْمِ الرَّحِيلِ, and preparedness or getting prepared for the day in which we journey, we travel. The journey, of course, is after death. So this is the meaning on what we are trying to achieve: preparedness, fear, and actions. Now, I don't even need to demonstrate or to give good examples or lots of explanation of what is happening to Ummah today, because I know everybody in this room already knows that. And the brother already gave us a brief summary. It's pretty atrocious. The Ummah today is suffering. I don't need to let anybody in this room know that we are madloom, that we are oppressed Ummah today. So I won't go into any of those details. But what effect does that have upon us? Everybody who is oppressed, that has an effect upon them. It changes them in some way. It makes them a different person. From being the happy person they were, they become the sad person. From being the person who had hope, it is possible that they lose some of that hope. In fact, they might lose all hope that this oppression would ever end. And if you live as we have lived, where every single day that we've been alive, there has been oppression on this earth of Muslims, merely for the fact that they were born into Muslim families and they are Muslims. And the world is afraid that these Muslims will ever wake up and return to their deen. And so for that reason they're oppressed. For that reason they're killed, they're tortured, they're murdered, all the things the brother mentioned and more. We've lived every day like that. So it's not any wonder that some of us, and many in the Ummah, might feel a lack of hope, somewhat despairing that we can ever change this situation, that there is a bright future ahead for us. In fact, maybe we've given up, we've resigned to the fact that this is the way things are, that Allah made this Ummah to be the oppressed Ummah, and therefore all we can do is raise our hands in dua and hope Hope for what? Actually, there is no hope. So end our lives quickly and let's have Jannah quickly. That is the situation that many Muslims are in. And it's possible that any of us could slip into that situation if we're not careful. Because of this widespread corruption, because of the lack of deen, because you see many Muslims who aren't conscientious about their deen, because the Muslim world isn't controlled by the commands and the prohibitions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we think maybe we'll never see a day when that will happen. Maybe that is not for this lifetime. Maybe that is for other people. It's not our time yet, you'll hear people say. In fact, the munkar has become ma'roof in the Muslim lands, as it is here, and the ma'roof has become munkar in the Muslim lands, as it is here. The whole situation is reversed. The deen is almost non-existent in the lives of people, even though we fast, even though we pray. And by Allah, you should take that as a blessing, the fact you can fast and you can pray. Because there are Muslims on this earth today who live in lands which has been part of the Muslim lands, and yet they are not able to fast. Why? Because the government that rules over them prevents them from fasting. It forbids them from fasting. They're not able to pray. They're not allowed to pray. They're in prison if they try to pray. So there is oppression merely for simple acts of ibadah that the Muslims are suffering in this way. So this despairing feeling, it comes about after witnessing this. Or you feel that this change to a better situation is so difficult and it's happening so slowly that those who are despairing, it appears to be, it's never really going to happen. It's such a slow change, I may never see it. It's going to take centuries, they say. Or it just won't change. It's just so difficult to imagine working for this change and actually seeing it to change that people give up. They don't want to try this anymore. Or they look at the challenges in front of them and they say they're insurmountable. Even they just look at the technology, they look at the life of the opposition, if you want to call it that, the life of the kuffar, the life of the disbelieving states, the lives of the countries, the colonialist countries who actually oppress us. They say, how can we bring something which can challenge that? We don't have that capability. We don't have that strength. They see that the dawah carrier, the one who calls to the truth, the one who calls to Islam and says, we are trying to change this to a better situation. We want the khilafah, ala minhaj nabuwah. We want the way of life that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam showed us to live. And see that his strength is so meager, he's so weak, he's got virtually no resources, he's got no power, he has no TV stations, he has no armies, he has no grand internet sites of the type of Google and Facebook and Twitter. He doesn't have that reach. He doesn't have hundreds of millions of followers like the pop stars do. So he said, he's so weak. What can he do? And so therefore despair settles in. And yats, we call it in Arabic. It even sounds bad when you say it. It's a bad word. It's a real word, it's a reality. But it's one of those words which describes something which is bad. There is no goodness in this despair. There is nothing good that comes out of despair. Only a lack of hope. Only a sitting on your hands and doing nothing approach to life. Only a resigning to the fact that we cannot change anything, so therefore it's somebody else's responsibility to change it for me. In fact, most people of this despairing type, they've resigned to the fact that they can't even control their lives, and they let Allah be the one responsible for changing their lives. Even so much as in the personal life it can affect you when you start entering this despairing state, and it's a downward spiral and it's hard to get out of. So it only leads to despair and hope. It leads to a paranoia. It leads to a mentality which is always worrying about the strength of the other. It's worrying about how strong and how difficult it is to overcome these challenges. It worries about the strength of the police forces, or the strength of the armies, or the strength of the rulers, or the strength of the ordinary people in the street. It makes a person afraid to even walk down their street and tell people that they're Muslim. It makes it difficult upon you to even stand up straight, with your back straight, and say that I worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even though you hold on to the truth, it makes you want to bow your head almost in shame. This is what despair and lack of hope does for us. It makes us skeptical of anybody who's calling for the truth. It makes us belittle any good. If we hear their success in the dawah, if we hear some people have come to Islam, then we start to think, well, did they? Is it really? Is it all that good? and we start to belittle it and think of it as nothing. We exaggerate the weaknesses of others and their deficiencies, and we're always very quick to find fault in others. This is the situation of the despairing person. And as you can see, there's no good in that. It's something which the Sharia has forbidden, has given only a bad name to this. And the intellect, our minds, it's only bad. There's nothing good to come from it. If you look at Ya'qub alayhi salam, the father of Yusuf alayhi salam, Yusuf who was taken and thrown in a well by his brothers, such that they thought that he had perished. They got rid of him. They thought, and they told their father, he's been eaten by a wolf. So everybody thought they're never going to see Yusuf again. The brothers who did the crime, and the father who was saddened for many decades, because his favourite son Yusuf alayhi salam was no longer with him. And one time, later in their life, you know the story, Binyamin, the second favourite son of the father, of Ya'qub alayhi salam, he was also taken. Actually, he was taken by Yusuf alayhi salam, who had survived and had become, you know, almost a high position in the land of Egypt at the time. But now his second son has been taken away from him. And so the sons who had done the crime in the first place went back to him to explain to this. So he replied to them like this, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran. He says, يَا بُنَيَّ اذْهَبُوا فَتَحَسَّسُوا مِنْ يُوسُفُ. I'll start again. يَا بُنَيَّ اذْهَبُوا فَتَحَسَّسُوا مِنْ يُوسُفَ وَأَخِيهِ وَلَا تَيْأَسُوا مِنْ رَوْحِ اللَّهِ إِنَّهُ لَا يَيْأَسُ مِنْ رَوْحِ اللَّهِ إِلَّا الْقَوْمَ الْكَافِرُونَ. So he replied to them, and this shows his wisdom and his hikmah. And he was, of course, was a prophet, alayhi salam, as well. He said, "Oh my sons, go and seek news, find out about Yusuf and his brother." Remember, Yusuf has been gone for decades and everybody thinks he's dead. Yet he's telling them to go out and find out about Yusuf and his brother who's just recently been kidnapped or captured. He says, "Do not despair of Rawh Allah. Do not despair of the rest and the ease and the solace which comes from Allah. Because no one despairs of the solace and the ease and the Rawh from Allah except for the people who are kafirun. Only the disbelievers have despair that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is about to bring them ease." This is the understanding and this is the hikmah of Ya'qub alayhi salam. And it's a clear ayah in the Quran which tells us this despair is bad. This despair is forbidden for us. It is not one of the descriptions of the believers. Yet we must understand that these challenges in front of us, they are weighty, they are big. Nobody here is saying live a dreamer's life and belittle every difficulty and say it's nothing, nothing, I'm not even going to prepare for it. I'm not even going to make iftar. Iftar is just going to come to me because I know the ease is going to come to me. That is not the attitude of the believer. The attitude of the believer is not the one who says it's Allah's responsibility to feed me, it's Allah's responsibility to change everything, and I'm just going to sit back and wait for the rahah of Allah to come. That's not the rahah that he's looking for. He knows he has to work, he knows he has to prepare, but he does not despair. So what could you say about this person? What is this person that I'm describing? This is a believer, of course. The one who says, I must work, I must do my actions. Allah has commanded me to do this. I must prepare the iftar if I want to be fed. But at the same time, I have full confidence. I have hope. What do you call this person? He's mutawakkil. He is the one who has tawakkul. He is the one who has reliance upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we'll come back to this point inshallah near the end. But the situation today, he understands, is just as Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam described it to be. He said, بدأ الدين غريبا وسيعود غريبا كما بدأ فطوبى للغرباء. He actually is not depressed by this hadith. He gains strength from this hadith. This hadith says to him, as I will translate inshallah, he says, Islam came strange. I mean, nobody recognized this Islam when it arrived. All the people rejected it except for a handful, and then a few more, and then a few more, and then many more. And it will come back strange, meaning it's going to go away, and it has gone away. And then it will come back and people won't recognize it. They say, what is this khilaf you're talking about? What is this ruling, hukm billah? What does this mean? Hukm bima anzalallah. What is all that talk you're talking about? I don't understand any of this. But it will come back, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said it will come back. Just as it came the first time, as a stranger. Nobody recognizes it, except a few, and a few more, and then a few more, and then many more, inshallah. فَتُوبَى لِلْغُرَبَاءِ. Tuba, this is a blessing. This is something in Jannah for those who are the strangers. The ghuraba are the strangers, the ones who came back to the deen first. Before it became ma'ruf, before it became everybody says, Before it became the bandwagon that everybody's jumping on. It's the early ones, the ones who were calling for this deen when it was still strange. So this is a source of strength. This is a source of hope, because Rasulullah ﷺ said it is coming back. And there is great reward in those who are those people who call for it before it has come back. But Rasulullah ﷺ also warns us of this type of person, the one who doesn't have tawakkul, the one who has lost hope, the one who is despairing. He says, إِذَا قَالَ الرَّجُلُ هَلَكَ النَّاسِ فَهُوَ أَهْلَكُهُم. If he has given up on the people, he said, if a man says the people are destroyed, or the people have been destroyed, then he is the worst of them. He is the most destroyed of them. The one who has no hope in the ummah, the one who's lost hope, who has lack of hope, who despairs that this ummah can rise again and cannot find goodness in them and only finds bad, and is highly critical. In fact, Imam Al-Khattabi, he said it means that a man will not cease to find fault in the people and draw attention to their faults and say how they're corrupted or they have perished, etc. and so on. But he is worse than them. Maybe he is impressed with himself and he sees himself as better than them, perhaps, and he's trying to analyze what is the meaning of this hadith. So this is the situation of the person who gives up in other people and the change that could come from other people. Because to be frank, to be honest, it's not me that's going to be the one who's going to establish khilafah on my own. I can't have a khilafah around this table, and you have a khilafah on your piece of table, and you have 10 khilafahs there and 20 khilafahs there. There's one khilafah for the ummah. That means the ummah has to work together. But sometimes we feel that's impossible. That's too difficult. We see the divisions between the ummah. So you hear a man say, that ummah, they're never going to unify. Look at them. There's Brelvis, there's Derbundis, there's Salafis, there's Sufis, there's Shi'is, there's whatever else you want to come across. And he can't imagine. And he starts to criticize them. Of course, he's way above them. He's way better than them in his own eyes, because he says they can't unify. And actually you'll find that he himself, even though he prays and fasts, he is the worst of them. The only reason they can't unify is because you keep telling them they can't unify. The only one who doesn't believe they can unify is you. I don't mean you, brother, I mean that imaginary man that I'm pointing to. The one who keeps telling us that they halak an-nas, that they are destroyed, that they can never unify. So Rasulullah ﷺ criticized that man badly. So you can see despair is not something that is part of our deen. Despair is something far away from our deen. This is not a description of the believers. And it contradicts our deen. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that He will help. He promises that He will help, in fact. So he says in the Quran, وَلَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا مِن قَبْلِكَ رُسُلًا مِّن قَوْمِهِمْ فَجَاءُوهُمْ بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ فَانْتَقَمْنَا مِنَ الَّذِينَ أَجْرَمُوا وَكَانَ حَقًّا عَلَيْنَا نَصْرُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, before you we sent messengers to their people, and they too brought them clear signs. But we took revenge on those who did evil, and it is our duty to help the believers. فَحَقٌّ عَلَيْنَا نَصْرُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. So the one who despairs has given up on this ayah. He says, actually he's saying this ayah can't be true. If Allah promises it is the right upon Allah, He made it a right upon Himself to help the believers, then who are we to turn around and say Allah will never help the believers? Allah's not going to help us. Who are we? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it a promise. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised more than this. Very specifically, He said, وَعَدَ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْكُمْ وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ لِيَسْتَخْلِفَنَّهُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ كَمَا اسْتَخْلَفَ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ وَلِيُمَكِّنَنَّ لَهُمْ دِينَهُمُ الَّذِي ارْتَضَىٰ بِهِ وَلِيُمَكِّنَنَّ لَهُمْ دِينَهُمُ الَّذِي I'm having difficulty today. وَلِيُمَكِّنَنَّ لَهُمْ دِينَهُمُ الَّذِي ارْتَضَىٰ لَهُمْ وَلِيُبَدِّلَنَّهُم مِّن بَعْدِ خَوْفِهِمْ أَمَنًا. So this ayah, if you can say it properly and better than me, inshallah, Allah has promised those of you, and this is a promise to all of the ummah, from the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam until everybody who reads it until the Qiyamah. So He has promised those of you who have iman and do the right actions, that He will make them successors in the land, as He made those before them successors, and He will firmly establish for them their deen, which He is pleased, and give them in place of their fear security. So Allah has promised He's going to help, and He's even told us what type of help He's going to give. So there's no place for a believer to say Allah won't help us. There's no place for a believer to say help is for others. Because then he's taken himself out of the ranks of the believers. He's saying, I'm not the believer who does the good actions. And nobody wants to be amongst those people. So he should say, I am a believer who does the good actions and Allah will help me. He's promised it and I'm expecting it anytime soon. And he knows and he has full confidence that Allah will help. In fact, there's a hadith of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He says, this matter will certainly reach every place touched by the night and day. Allah will not leave a house or residence except that Allah will cause this religion to enter it, by which the honourable will be honoured and the disgraceful will be disgraced. Allah will honour the honourable with Islam and He will disgrace the disgraceful with disbelief, with kufr. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has made it even more explicit than that. He said this deen will come to every place, including Derby, including London where I live, including Scotland way up in the north, including all the places you don't think that Islam is going to come to. Islam will come there. And it will either honour the residents or it will disgrace them, depending upon their belief, whether they're believers or not. So Islam is coming back. It's absolutely coming back. Allah has promised that. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has promised that. And more than that, we have the example of the believers before us. We have the example of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his Sahaba to show us their attitude of how they faced the difficulties and how they stood up, and the previous ummahs before them. And Allah has narrated these stories. Why? So that we can gain something from them. So we can learn lessons from them. So let us learn some lessons from them. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Yusuf, He says, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِن قَبْلِكَ إِلَّا رِجَالًا نُوحِيَ إِلَيْهِم مِّنْ أَهْلِ الْقُرَى أَفَلَمْ يَسِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ فَيَنْظُرُوا كَيْفَ كَانَ عَاقِبَةُ الَّذِينَ مِن قَبْلِهِمْ وَلَدَارُ الْآخِرَةِ خَيْرٌ لِلَّذِينَ اتَّقَوْا أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ. So Allah introduces the topic. He says, we sent none before you, but men inspired with revelation from those among the people of the towns of the cities. Have they not travelled in the land and seen the final fate of those before them? Allah is telling us, go out, look. Haven't you looked what happened to those before you? Have you not learnt anything from the previous ummahs? Haven't you understood this matter yet? The abode of the next world is better for you who have taqwa. And taqwa is, of course, what we are trying to get from our fasting. So will you not use your minds? Will you not think about this? And then he goes on to say, حتى إذا استيأس الرسل وظنوا أنهم قد كذبوا جاءهم نصرنا فنجي من نشاء ولا يرد بأسنا عن القوم المجرمين. And then when the messengers despaired and thought that they themselves had been denied or had been lied to, our help came to them. And then when the messengers despaired and they thought they'd been denied the victory and the help, our help came to them. And those we willed, we saved. Our force, our violence, our destruction, the bats of Allah, cannot be averted from people who are the wrongdoers, the evildoers. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He even used this despair and hope in the Quran here. And He said, even it got to the point where people thought that they were about to not be helped. Even the Rusul, even the messengers and those among them, they got to this point where they felt, this is so bad, I cannot see any other way. If Allah doesn't help me now, then there's no hope. And that word would be on their lips. If we are not helped now, then there's no chance of anybody helping us, because the situation looks so dire in front of them. And then Allah sent His help. So no matter how bad things get, Allah's help is just round the corner. It is moments away. And that is what the belief of the believers is. But we get into a situation where we have incomplete awareness of these facts. We think we know better than what the Quran is telling us. We think we know more than the real situation. We look at what's going on in the world and we don't understand what is behind the scenes. We think we've understood what is going on. We think we've understood that America is very strong because they flexed their muscles, they threw some rockets, they said we've got lots of aeroplanes and boats and missiles. But we don't understand the weakness which is really behind there. Or we look at the murders and the killings and the tortures and we see only bad in that. We don't see that good could come out of this bad. Even though it is bad, we don't see that the good is just around the corner. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He draws our attention to this matter and He says, فَعَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرُهُ شَيْئًا وَيَجْعَلَ اللَّهُ فِيهِ خَيْرًا كَثِيرًا. And there might be something which you dislike, something which you find difficulty in liking, which you hate in fact. But maybe Allah can bring goodness out of it. or placed in it a lot of good, yet it appears bad to you. So it is upon us, if we are determined not to have any despair, if we are determined to have hope, if we have decided that we are believers who are going to do the good actions, and we're not going to give up on the help of Allah, and we're not going to give up on the ease which is just around the corner which Allah has promised us, then we need to take control of the situation and not blame somebody else. Don't blame the ummah. Only blame myself for lack of action. Turn it around upon myself. Don't say that somebody else has the responsibility to change before this ummah can become good. Turn it upon myself and say, I have the responsibility to change. And inshallah by this the ummah will become good. Because bad events could have good consequences. In fact, the ones who have hope, they have optimism. They have optimism and they turn it around. Whenever they see failure, they don't see it as complete failure and destruction. They see it as an opportunity to search for another way. Search for an opportunity for something better can come out of it. In fact, I used to hear this all the time. I still hear this all the time. People tell me about, you tell people, we've got to spread this word to the world. We've got to tell people about Islam. We've got to preach people the truth of Islam. We've got to explain Islam, because if people hear it, then they'll come to it. And they tell me, brother, you're dreaming. They've got the BBC. We can't compete with the BBC. That's in every single house. They've got the whole internet. That's in every single computer and every phone. Forget about the houses. They've got CNN, they've got all the networks. We don't have mass media. What we should do is gather some money and make our own CNN or BBC. But we can't. We're never going to get it. And you can see the cycle of despair. But if you look at it, that's a challenge, isn't it? That's difficult. When you think about it, they have the BBC, I don't have a BBC. They have CNN, I don't have a CNN. That sounds like a really big difficulty. But the one who has hope, he says, actually that's not so difficult. That's actually their failure, that's not their success. They think that is their success, so they rely upon it. But actually that's their weakness. They think by putting a newsreader or one show presenter who spreads their kufr and tells everybody else to give up on Islam, or their comedians who are always mocking our deen, they think that that is going to get through to us. And they rely upon that. But they don't realise that he can only speak one way. Have you ever tried to ask your TV a question? Have you ever had a dialogue with your TV? Have you ever debated with your TV? You can't. But you can debate with a dawah carrier. The one who lives in your street and tells you something that BBC just lied to you. You can come back to him. You can say, well, actually, I'm not sure what you just said. Let's have a debate. And you can have a debate. You can have a debate in the streets, on the doorsteps. In fact, if the Muslims who have hope, who carry this dawah, realize their strength, they have 10 times the strength, 100 times the strength of BBC. Why? Because how many people work for the BBC? How many news presenters do they have? How many eloquent preachers do they have? 10, 20, 100 max. Let's give it 100, to be really generous. Now you tell me how many streets those 100 people can go down and start spreading their kufr, who have the confidence to speak like that in front of people. And I'll show you 10 dawah carriers who can reach 100 times the people that the BBC can reach, with much more confidence and more convincing arguments, because they can be challenged and they can come back and they can sense what the people are sensing. So my point is that seems like a despairing situation, but actually there's much hope in that. You realise your strength when you don't give up, when you realise that this appears to be a weakness, but actually it's our strength. In fact, throughout the history and throughout the seerah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in fact, throughout the time of the prophets, from the beginning of time, most of the ease has come after hardship. Most of the positive and the good outcomes has come out of something extremely negative and what appeared to be very bad. So Siraqa, he was the man employed by Quraysh to chase Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as he escaped Makkah with Abu Bakr for the hijrah. And he caught up with them eventually, after they hid in the cave, after they went, he caught up with them. So Abu Bakr is thinking, this is the end, that's it. What can we do? But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, and he knew that that Allah is not going to forsake him, that Allah is not going to give up on him. And so what does he do? He promises Siraqa, he says, Irja' ya Siraqa, walaka sawari Kisra. He says, go back, and you will have, the golden bracelets of Kisra. Is the, what is that? The emperor of the Persians. There's a name they used to use, like emperor, or Caesar, or something like that is the name they gave to the Persians. You will have the gold bracelets of the Persians. And in fact, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's promise was true, because he did actually go back and claim them, and he actually got to take them, and that wealth became his. So in the situation when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it appears like he's been caught, he has such confidence, he promises something he doesn't even have yet, but he knows it's going to happen. And so he gets out of that situation because he never gave up on hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help. And Musa alayhi salam, Rasulullah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, he says, كَذَلِكَ أَوْرَثْنَاهَا بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلِ فَأَتْبَعُوهُم مُشْرِقِينَ فَلَمَّا تَرَأَ الْجَمَعَانَ قَالَ أَصْحَابُ مُوسَى إِنَّا لَمُدْرَكُونَ قَالَ كَلَا إِنَّ مَعِيَ رَبِّي سَيَهْدِينَ. And so Allah he says, so it was we bequeathed to them the tribe of Israel. So they pursued them to the east, and so pursued them towards the east rather. And when the two hosts came in sight of one another, Musa's companions, they said, we will surely be overtaken now. So they started to give up. They started to think, how are we going to be helped now? We've got the sea here, and we've got the army here. We've been caught. But Musa alayhi, he said to them, he said, Kalla, never. My Lord is with me, and He will guide me. He will give me a way out of it. He had full confidence that Allah was going to help him. He didn't take him to all of that, only for them to be destroyed there and then. فَأَوْحَيْنَا إِلَى مُوسَى أَنْ أَضْرِبْ بِعِصَاكَ الْبَحْرَ فَانْفَلَقَ فَكَانَ كُلُّ فِرْقٍ كَالطَّوْدِ الْعَظِيمِ. So we revealed to Musa, strike the sea with your staff and split it in two, and each part is split in two, and each part like a towering cliff. فَأَلْزَفْنَا ثَمَّ الْآخَرِينَ وَأَنْجَيْنَا مُوسَى وَمَنْ مَعَهُ أَجْمَعِينَ. So he said, and we brought the others right up to it, and we rescued Musa and those who were with them, meaning the others were destroyed. So at a time when you felt that Musa was going to be destroyed, and the people around him felt that there's nothing can save us, actually Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did save them in a way that was impossible to imagine that they could be saved. So they had reliance upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the believers, and Musa alayhi salam had reliance in a way which you could not imagine. They did not look at what my hands can achieve. They looked at beyond what appeared to be normal for Allah to help them. And He helped them in a way that even they couldn't imagine. In the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he had just passed away. So the Sahaba, there's a lot of grief, a lot of sadness. But there's also something else happened immediately after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had passed. Many of the Muslims, who were the Arab Muslims at the time, who had become Muslims in those final years, they started to go back on their deen. They became murtadeen. They started to refuse to pay the zakat. They started to refuse to recognize Abu Bakr. They started to rebel and actually started to worship other gods, other idols, and take other people as their prophets, liars and cheaters and so on and so forth. And so it got to the situation, got so bad in those months, immediately after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away, that there was only Makkah, Medina, Ta'if, 3 towns left in Islam. And everywhere that Islam had touched prior to that, they had returned back to kufr. And there was a handful of people amongst them who held on to their deen. So that looks like a despairing situation. We no longer have the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so how are we going to bring all these people back? How are we going to fight the vast majority of all the Arabs now, who have already tasted Islam and they've gone back on it? Yet within 2 years, or just around 2 years, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was able to change that situation completely. All of them came back or were defeated in battles, to the point where now the futuhat, now the victories and the conquest started in the time of Umar bin al-Khattab, and all of the lands way beyond the Arab Peninsula were starting to be open to Islam. By the same people who had become murtad previous to that, they became the great light, shining lights in Islam. So people who had given up on their deen came back to the deen. If there's not hope in that story, where is the hope? We haven't even seen the Muslims that they give up on their deen completely. They still think they have their deen, yet they've been fooled and lied to by the ulama. They've been fooled and lied to by the fake politicians. Yet they still have their deen and they still desire their deen. So a people who had given up on their deen were brought back to Islam. How about those people who haven't even given up on their deen yet? So there's something here that we need to think about. That this despairing situation the Ummah finds itself in, this lack of hope, we need to understand how to end this problem once and for all. And it is by the definite conviction that the method of change will definitely lead to the change itself. The goal is as important as the method itself, and that's something for us to think about and ponder upon. Because Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he would promise Jannah to the family of Yasir at the time when they were being subjected to the worst of torture. He told the Muslims that they would distribute the wealth of the Persians at the time when they were surrounded and they were in the severest of hunger. They had no wealth at all, and he said, you're going to be distributing the wealth of all the Persians, and the wealth of the Persians was pretty enormous. It's like America and Germany and Britain today, the superpowers of the day. He told them that they would enter Rome and Constantinople at the same time when they were in the severest situation of fear, and they feared for their very lives, and they didn't know whether there would be any Islam left on the planet after that day. In that situation, he told them that this was going to happen. So you can see the confidence Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had, that he was standing and he was walking on the path that Allah had laid in front of him. And the victory, the consequences, those things that he was looking for were actually not so important. They were coming merely as a result of him standing on that path, of him treading that path. So the sabil, the way, became more important than the goal itself, or rather they became on the level. He believed in reaching the goal just as he believed in the method to reach that goal. So despair that we see in the ummah today, or in some people who stand on the side of truth but they've given up, they don't feel that they can reach this goal anymore. It is nothing more than a lack of vision that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had. They're lacking that, what is in front of them. They don't see that their path, if they stand on it and they stand firm on it, that they will definitely reach their goal. And so they start to deviate and wander off the path and sit back and let other people tread on the path, thinking it's a waste of time. So believing in the goal and the method, it makes us firm, no matter what the consequences are. So even if we see failure after failure and difficulty after difficulty and strife after strife, we stay on this path. Why? Because we understand that standing on the path is as important as the goal itself, where the path gets to. Actually, it says 5 minutes. I'm going to be more than 5 minutes, because there's important things we need to discuss. So even if I've taken a little bit more of time, I hope, inshallah, you'll forgive me, because I want to finish this, inshallah. Because the deen itself has set the goal just as it set the path. The goal is set, the deen told us what to achieve, that we must establish Islam in this earth, that we must carry this da'wah to the world, that we must establish the khilaf ala manhaj nabuwah. The deen told us that. It was the deen that gave us that instruction. But the deen also told us the way to get there, and gave us the instruction of what path to stand on and how to achieve it. So we've been obliged by the path just as we've been obliged by the goal. And in fact, we are not questioned. We're not questioned on achieving the goal. Whether we reach that goal or not is not going to stand on our account on the Qiyamah. But whether we stood on the path or not is going to stand on account on the Qiyamah. So the goal is actually the consequence of standing on the path, nothing more. Whereas standing on the path is the thing that we are in control of. So we must rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during all of this time. And so I read to you something about this tawakkul I've talked about and I've referred to. Because this is the heart of the matter. And by understanding this issue can be solved for all of the Muslims. The first Muslims understood that very well, this issue of tawakkul and reliance upon Allah. And they put their trust on Allah Ta'ala. Therefore they performed the great tasks and plunged themselves into severest difficulties. This is different to the Muslims who came after them, particularly when the material dominated their souls. And the Muslims were afflicted with the short vision and weak understanding. So they became alienated from the true tawakkul, which became futile words that have no reality in their life nor in their mind. So they misunderstood the meaning of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying, "I'qilha wa tawakkul," tie it and make tawakkul. Consequently, the zeal, their enthusiasm, it weakened, and the horizon of outlook in life narrowed. So they started to feel with inability, believe their power is limited, and they can't achieve more than they did. Therefore, Muslims will not return to take the seat of glory and plunge into life to achieve superiority unless they fully understand the meaning of tawakkul on Allah, reliance upon Allah, and they fully made tawakkul on Allah. This is because man can't realize great missions if they limited themselves to their human power alone. If man looked at these human powers only and he acted according to that outlook, he will feel impotent from realizing even the ordinary tasks, let alone mentioning the extraordinary ones. However, if man believed there are powers beyond his human power that help him in realizing his ambitions, then he would undoubtedly rush to what is greater than his power by depending upon those powers. So hence tawakkul on Allah is one of the most important elements of the Islamic Ummah and one of the most important thoughts in Islam. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He said, إِن يَنْصُرُكُمُ اللَّهُ فَلَا غَالِبَ لَكُمْ وَإِن يَخْذُلْكُمْ فَمَنْ ذَا الَّذِي يَنْصُرُكُمْ مِنْ بَعْدِهِ وَعَلَى اللَّهِ فَلْيَتَوَكَّلِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. If Allah helps you, none can overcome you. If He forsakes you, then who is there after that can help you? In Allah, then let the believers put their trust. And He says, قُلْ لَنْ يُصِيبَنَا إِلَّا مَا كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَنَا هُوَ مَوْلَانَا وَعَلَى اللَّهِ فَلْيَتَوَكَّلِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. And he said, say, O Prophet, nothing will happen to us except what Allah has decreed for us. He is our protector. And then on Allah let the believers put their trust. These are very explicit ayahs, which talk about the situation in the dunya that the Muslims must have reliance and hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَإِن تَوَلَّوْا فَقُلْ حَسْبِيَ اللَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُوَ عَلَيْهِ تَوَكَّلْتُ وَهُوَ رَبُّ الْعَرْشِ الْعَظِيمِ. But if they turn away, and people do turn away from the da'wah carriers, the ones who call to the truth, Allah is sufficient for me. There is no God but Him. On Him I put my trust, and He is the Lord of the supreme throne. And there are many ayahs and hadith about this. 70,000 of my ummah enter Jannah without being accounted. They are those who do not use magic or spells, do not see evil omens in things, and put trust in their Lord. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given a great reward. In fact, He's made it a duty upon the Muslims to have tawakkul. So commanding upon tawakkul, it is important for us to understand the correct meaning of this hadith, i'qil wa tawakkal. Tayat and make tawakkul, which is the misunderstanding. This hadith does not constrain or the meaning of tawakkul. And it does not constrain the ayat or the hadith with command put in having tawakkul upon Allah. And it does not explain or elaborate them because they are not in need of elaboration. They're not confusing. There's nothing unclear about those ayah or those hadith which tell us to have tawakkul. Everything is absolutely clear and obvious. So this hadith is explaining a different situation. It is a situation where it is an instruction to a Bedouin, a desert Arab who misunderstood something, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam explained it to him. So Anas bin Malik, he narrated that a man said, O Messenger of Allah, should I tie the camel and make tawakkul, or should I let it go free and make tawakkul? He was confused. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam corrected his misunderstanding, and he said, i'qilha wa tawakkul. He said, tie it and make tawakkul. He said, don't neglect your duty to tie it, but at the same time have tawakkul. He didn't say i'qilha thumma tawakkul. He didn't say tie it and then and only then have tawakkul. He didn't make one a condition on the other. He said tie it and have tawakkul, meaning they're two separate matters. So the issue of taking the means, i.e. tying the camel, doing your best, using your worldly powers, the powers that you have, this issue is completely different to the issue of tawakkul. It's another issue altogether. The issues have separated them. The issue of having tawakkul is independent. You have hope and reliance upon Allah that He will help you even when you cannot see how that help could possibly come. You do your actions, the actions you've been commanded to do, following the method of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to change the situation. You carry da'wah to the people even when you think the people will never listen to you. Nuh alayhi salam, he called the people for 900 years and they didn't listen. Nobody listened to him. Yet he carried on calling. He didn't look at his limited ability and say, I give up. He said, I'm going to keep calling because Allah has commanded me to keep calling, and I have reliance upon Allah that He will guide whomever He guides. It's in His hands, not in my hands. So he separated the issue just as we have to separate the two issues. So this issue then, the final point then, is that if we are looking for change, if we are looking for some kind of better situation, if we are looking for the Rawh of Allah and we're not giving up on it, we have to understand that this help, this victory, this change, it will never come to people who've given up on Allah, who do not obey Allah in having tawakkul, who do not obey Allah in having hope that His help is around the corner, who've given up. This help won't come to those people. So if we really want that victory to come, then we have to be the ones who most expect that victory to come. The ones who have the most hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us. The ones who have the most tawakkul upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because there's no place in our hearts for giving up. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, لا يموتن أحدكم إلا وهو يحسن الظن بالله عز وجل. He says, none of you will die except that he has husn al-dhann. What does that mean? It means that he has a great expectation, that he's hoping for the good from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that he is looking forward to what is good to come after his death and during his life. So the final thing I'm going to read to you then, and this really is the final one, it's only that long, look, it's coming quickly. Have hope in Allah that this talk will end soon, inshallah. Have tawakkul, that you'll get your rest. You will get it. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he was poisoned. So he died because he was murdered. So he died a shaheed. And the people came to visit him once they realized that he was dying, and he knew he was dying. There's no hope left. You get to that point where you can see this is where everybody dies. So he's expecting death. So the people came to visit him. Umar ibn al-Khattab came to visit him. And Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he gave him a wasiyah. Wasiyah is an advice. It's like your final advice. You think your legacy, what you're going to leave behind for him. He said, "Usika bi wasiyatin, in anta qabaltaha anni." He says, "I'll give you this advice. Maybe you'll accept it from me." He said, "If you accept it from me, inna lillahi azza wa jalla haqqan bil layli la yaqbiluhu bin nahar." He says, Allah has a right which is in the night, which he does not accept in the daytime. Meaning, put things in their place. وَإِنَّ لِلَّهِ حَقًّا بِالنَّهَارِ لَا يَقْبِلْهُ بِاللَّيْلِ. And he has a right, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a right in the daytime, which he will not accept if you bring it in the nighttime. وَإِنَّهُ لَا يَقْبِلَ النَّافِلَ حَتَّى تُؤَدِّيَ الْفَرِيضَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not accept the supererogatory, the nafila prayers, the mandub, what is it, tahajjud, the taraweeh that we're praying. Allah will not accept this if people have not first brought the commandment, the farida. Allah will not accept your sadaqah until you have given your zakat. Allah will not accept your mandub, all of the gifts you give, all of the karama, all of the extra things that you like to do, if you haven't first brought forward what is obligatory upon you. وإنما ثقلت موازين من ثقلت موازينه في الآخرة باتباعهم الحق في الدنيا. So he said, the scale is very heavy for the one who has a heavy scale in the next life, due to them following the truth in this life. And he said, وَثَقُلَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ وَثَقَّلَهُ عَلَيْهِمْ. And Allah made it heavy upon them. So those who follow the truth in this life will have a heavy scale. The scale will weigh heavily for them on the akhirah. And Allah made it heavy upon them in the dunya because they followed the truth in the dunya. وَحَقٌّ لِمِيزَانٍ يُودَعُ فِيهِ الْحَقِّ أَنْ يَكُونَ ثَقِيلًا. And he said, and it is only right that a scale that has the truth put upon it should be very heavy. Meaning carrying the truth and following the truth in this life is very difficult. So don't expect it to be light. وَإِنَّمَا خَفَّتْ مَوَازِينُ مَنْ خَفَّتْ مَوَازِينَهُ فِي الْآخِرَةِ باتباعهم الباطل في الدنيا وحقته عليهم في الدنيا وحق لميزان يودع فيه الباطل أن يكون خفيفا. He said that the exact opposite. He said that the scale which is light for the person who has a light scale on the akhirah in the next life is light because they followed the batil, they followed the falsehood, they didn't follow the truth, they followed whims, desires and all kinds of falsehood in this life. And it is only right that there is the scale which holds the batil is light, and it is light upon them in this dunya, i.e. they found ease in this dunya. And then he said, أَلَمْ تَرَ أَنَّ اللَّهَ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ أَنزَلَ آيَةَ الرِّجَاءِ عند آية الشدة وآية الشدة عند آية الرجاء وذكر آية الرحمة وآية العذاب. He said, did you not see that Allah sent down the ayat of hope, the verses of hope, with the ayah, the same verses of shiddah, of harshness and difficulty, and the ones that make you fear. And did you not see the ayah that Allah sent down, the ayahs of shiddah, the ones that are difficult, the ones that are hard to hear, with the ayahs of raja, the ones of hope, meaning they come together. And he mentioned the mercy, the verses of mercy, when he mentions the verses of punishment? Did you not see that Allah sent them together and they come next to each other all the time? لا يكون العبد راغبا راهنا لا يلقي بيديه إلى تهلكة. And he said, such that the abd, such the slave, us, when he hears this, that becomes, he wants it, he desires for it, and he becomes devoted to it, and he does not throw himself into destruction by his own hands. وَلَا يَتَمَنَّى عَلَى اللَّهِ غَيْرَ الْحَقِّ. And he does not expect and does not hope for anything of Allah except the truth. And then Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he said to Umar bin Khattab, فإن أنت حفظت وصيتي هذه, he said, if you kept hold of this, i.e. protected and held on to this advice of mine, فلا يكونن غائب أحب إليك من الموت. He said, if you held on to this, that I'm telling you about this, then nothing will become, the thing which is far away from you, will not become more beloved to you than death. You will long for death, because it is your escape from the difficulty of this life. وَلَا بُدَّ لَكَ مِنْهُ. And it will definitely come to you. وَإِنَّ أَنْتَ ضَيَّعْتَ وَصِيَّتِ هَذِهِ فَلَا يَكُونَنَّ غَائِبٌ أَبْغَضَ إِلَيْكَ مِنَ الْمَوْتِ وَلَا بُدَّ لَكَ مِنْهُ. And he said finally, he said, if you left this wasiyah of mine, if you didn't pay attention to it, if you didn't hold on to it and cling to it, this advice that I'm giving you, my dying words, if you don't hold on to this, then nothing will become more angry to you. Nothing will make you more angry than death, thinking about that death, even though it will definitely come to you. And then he died after that, with the dying words, he said, توفني مسلما والألحقني بالصالحين. He said, he's making a dua, he's saying, take me as a Muslim and bring me close and join me back with the Salihin. So I end with a dua, inshallah. Allahumma inna na'udhu bika minan nay'asa min rawhika wa rahmatika innaka sami'u mujib al-gharib. Ameen ya Rabb.
Jazakallah khair Yahya for that presentation. Inshallah, open the floor now for any questions or comments that you may want to pass. For the sisters, there's some pens and paper on the side if you want to write it down and then pass over to the front of the table. So I'll open it up. Mohammed?
Jazakallah khair for that. Just on the point you made regarding hope, there was a circle recently, and the brother who was talking about, again, how bad the situation is for Muslims in this day and age. And he was comparing it to the time of Musta'sim, as in the time of the Mongols, and how bad the time was for them. And he went on to describe how the Mongols, they would wipe out land after land, village, ransack, rape, how fierce they were. But not even the men, it was how fierce the women were as well, and how destructive they were. It was just like, they were just like their men. And he said that it got to such a point for the Muslims that they actually believed that the Mongols, the tribes of Mongols, were Ya'juj and Ma'juj. The two tribes which were extremely destructive. And so the Mongols, they kept on destroying everything until they met with Saifuddin Qutuz in Egypt. And the point that the brother was trying to make is that he never ever gave up hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he only had 20,000 men against 200,000 Mongols. And he pushed the Mongols back and he defeated them. Because he had trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he helped the Muslims win. But the point that I'm trying to make isn't just because, of physical war that they won, because it's also about what you mentioned about giving dawah. Because the Mongols weren't defeated through battle itself. Every land that they took over belonged to the Muslims. And so what was to happen is they would be ruling over Muslims who would influence the Mongols through just the way that they lived their lives, i.e. just by abiding by the Sharia. And if we use that idea today, we can say that, it's not fair because they've got CNN or they've got BBC, and it's true because it's not fair. I mean, it is unfair, but it's not unfair for us, it's unfair for them. Because they may have the CNN, but we've got Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you know, if we and just how the Mongols defeated just how the Muslims defeated the Mongols by showing how great Islam is, right, through their dawah. Now, inshallah, we can do the same.
Jazakallah khair. Alhamdulillah. I mean, there's so many stories you could be here. Well, we'll be here a lifetime, in fact. We wouldn't end our lives if we just went through mentioning all the stories where Allah has helped people in a desperate situation. I mean, on a personal level as well as on the level of the ummah, the stories that become famous. The fact is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised the help. That's the most important thing for us. And it's completely ignorant. It's completely against anything any intelligent person would imagine that the dhulm is going to, persist eternally. It isn't. It always comes to an end. Every great nation has tumbled and failed. People used to say this is, and I used to live in Egypt, and all the Egyptians used to laugh, and because I'm English, they used to say, oh, they've got this saying, they translated a saying, the empire which the sun will never set on, meaning the British Empire did at one time go around the entire globe. The sun was always on a part of the British Empire. That's what they used to say about themselves in the 1800s and the early part of the 1900s. Come the Second World War, they're defeated. Even though they like to think they won the war, in reality, they walked out of it emaciated, completely defeated. They're a shadow of their former selves. They gave up all of their colonies within 10 years. Americans took over, it's true. But there's nothing left of the British Empire. It's nothing, but people used to fear that empire. It's gone. The Americans, people used to think the Americans are so mighty, so strong. But the Americans get bloody noses just going into a place like Somalia. American strength isn't as strong as they think it is. They're not able to really defeat the Afghanis in the way that they want to defeat the Afghanis. They can't really wipe Islam out in the way they would like to wipe Islam out. Their economy is crumbling and falling apart. They're in desperate situations, but people think they're so strong and they've got so much mighty power. But in reality, we haven't really, it's only a matter of time before they will fall at their own hands, let alone at our hands. But we have the solution to the problem. We have the guidance which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. So it is upon us, to be the ones that guide the world back to Islam. It's upon us to follow the path of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and have hope always that the victory is coming. It's just a matter of time.
Irfan.
Can you mention something, for example, the work of the Muslim Allah is always linked to his obedience? Because I think what happens, whenever we face hardships, either individually or as an ummah, we're always desperate to look for a way out. Yeah? And what happens sometimes is that we can then compromise on certain things, but sometimes also we get kind of like Islamic legal verdicts to justify them. So we get verdicts of lesser of two evil, of necessity, all of these things to kind of overcome the hardship. But sometimes these things are actually abused.
Yeah, so, in reality, the Aqidah became confused to most of the Muslims. So this happened soon after the Sahaba, in fact. So the Sahaba were blessed in that lived Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Everything was clear. They had Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam around them to clarify everything. Then the Muslims expanded their lands in the time of Umar al-Khattab to the point where they started to meet, different philosophers, different philosophies, particularly the Greeks, sometimes the Persians and the Indians beyond them. Some of these ideas started to mix in, mingle with Islam, and you started to get this scholastic movement. Many of the ulama entered into this, and in reality, things became confusing. The Aqidah, even though we believed in the headlines and nobody denied the Aqidah, but it started to have less effect upon us in our lives. So things like Qadr, things like believing in the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He knows, it started to think, well, if He knows, what's the point of acting? So you get Qadariyah, you get this kind of fatalistic attitude, and it started to affect the Muslims, to the point it still affects the Muslims today. People don't realize they have a responsibility, they make Allah responsible. The bad situation is His job. In fact, you see people do it all the time. It's not just the Muslims who suffer this, by the way. This society suffers this very, very badly. It happens a lot these days that people blame others for their failings. Things aren't going right, so somebody else is responsible. And they can't see that they themselves have the power to change it themselves. They always make somebody else responsible for it. But there also come another idea with it, along with this confusion came the idea that, change and help has to come in some mystical, mysterious way. change from Allah only comes when the sea is split in two and we walk through it. We need miracles to change. Only the awliya could possibly help us. And so along came the idea that only Mahdi alayhi salam can help us. Meaning that Allah can't help us until Mahdi comes. And they made it a precondition, which is wrong. There's no such evidence, there's no explanation, it's completely out of the blue, it's complete ignorance and nonsense to say that Allah only helps people through magic and mysterious and miraculous means, which isn't true at all. Because Allah has helped in many ways, as well as through the mysterious ways, as well as through other ways. So it is the important point for us is not to dwell upon the failings of this misunderstanding, is to actually focus on the correct understanding as we should promote it. Is that having tawakkul has got nothing to do whatsoever with doing actions or not doing actions. Whether you follow the truth or follow the batil, you still have to have tawakkul. Because you've been ordered, it's an independent duty to have reliance upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To know and feel in your heart that He is the one who helps. That He is the one who provides the victory. But at the same time, you also know, if you're muttaqi, if you've got any taqwa, you know that if you don't do what you've been commanded, then you're sinful. So the Muslim lives this life trying not to be sinful, trying to be obedient. And actually he knows the results in Allah's hands. But at the same time, he knows he's been commanded to do actions. And those actions will lead to those results, inevitably. He can see the way Allah created this dunya. He can see the laws of nature and how they work together. He knows that if he drops the pen, it's going to go bang on the floor. There's no escape from that. He knows that. He knows that pen is not going to go up like that. We did, because I threw it. But he knows it doesn't go on its own. He knows that. So we don't live in this world of mysteriousness, hoping that one day Allah's going to make that float. Today, it's going to float. It's not going to happen. Why? Because Allah promised that it's not going to happen. Allah does not change the way He has created creation. He doesn't give us all these miracles. We're not prophets. He hasn't shown us these. He hasn't given us these gifts to be able to change the reality of the nature. So we don't rely upon it in that way. We rely upon the change to happen. However, if a person is musammim, if a person is determined and fixed upon this understanding, then he starts to see that this change can come about in ways that his mind was closed to before. He starts to see opportunities where everybody else saw lack of opportunity. He feels and he sees that it is possible even though it appeared impossible. And that comes as a result of clinging on to the Aqeedah. So the Aqeedah solves that problem for him. The problem he had wasn't that there was no way. The problem is he couldn't see the way. The problem wasn't that he doesn't know how to solve the problem. The problem was that he was refusing to accept that he has to solve the problem in a particular way. So it solves that problem. It's like a depressed person who says, I'm really depressed, but I'm hungry. What can I do? I don't feel like getting out of bed. I'm hungry. He knows ultimately he's just going to have to get out of bed or else it's going to get worse and worse and worse, and he's going to feel even worse. Until he gets out of bed and actually goes to the fridge or whatever, gets the food and eats it, he's never going to start to feel a lack of hunger. He's never going to solve that problem. But a person who sits back and deliberately just restrains and holds himself back like that, that person, they have an aqeedah which can solve that for them. And that is a situation for us as individuals as well as for the ummah. Alaykum as-salam.
It's a bit, some Muslims feel that it's a very difficult situation that we're in now, so it's hard not to become despondent in the situation that we're in right now. So not only do we have people on the outside attacking us, but we also have people from internally attacking each other. So like every time you go to a Salafi masjid, not every Salafi masjid, but some Salafi masjid, especially the Jumu'ah, in every khutbah they always say something about the Sufis. Sufi in the masjids or in the Brahmi masjids, they're always saying something about the Salafi. So I remember the time when I was reading about Salafi in Yubi, where the way he went and retook over Palestine was he got all the forces together and he united everyone first and then he went and took over Palestine. So should we not use the same blueprint of our way forward, as in we need to unite all the different, I wouldn't call it sects, but all the different opinions in Islam, get everyone Muslims united and then launch something in terms of to counteract the external threats. So what should we do?
You're right, but be careful. Yeah? Don't let that become an excuse to sit back and do nothing and wait. Because some people might say, I'm agreeing with you, but I'm saying be careful, because some people might say, Yes, unify the ummah, get everybody to be happy clappy, holding hands, singing a happy song in the street, whatever, we're all Muslims, no worries. And then we'll do the next thing. So we're all happy Muslims living in democracy, and then we'll do the next thing. That's not the way it works. So happily disobedient, unified in our disobedience, that's not what we're looking for. We need to be unified in our obedience, that's the important point. So the unity we're looking for is a unity, not just that we stop criticising each other, although we have to do that, because that's munkar, it's forbidden, it's haram. We're talking about a unity upon something, upon the truth. Unity upon the actions which are fruitful and meaningful and are commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to take us forward. You notice that, I came across some prisoners, okay? People who put in prison in Britain, Muslims. There are no Shias, there's no Sunnis, there's no Wahhabis, there's no Salafis in prison. Did you know that? There's none whatsoever. There's just Muslims. They know that they've got to stick together. And these are people who are at each other's throats the day before, but they're all working together because they realise that they're not going to survive this unless they work together. When Iraq was attacked in 2003, how many Shias and Sunnis were there? There was just Muslims. Because they realised that America's coming and we're just going to defend. So the Shias, the Sunnis, there were no Shias and Sunni divides between them in those days. That division came later when America sent its agents. When it took over and it started to send those people, hypocrites, who obey America and create the divisions. So you don't see divisions. How many, anyway, we could go through hundreds of examples like this. There's no need. The important point for us is to say that the unity we're looking for is unity of obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And not petty disputes, not finding difficulties amongst ourselves, or differences rather, which are petty, quite frankly. And in fact, often you find both sides are wrong. Both sides are wrong on their opinion, and there's a third way they haven't even considered yet. So our responsibility is to show them the third way, the one you haven't considered, the obedient way, and make sure everybody agrees with that and starts to tread upon that path, and then you can say we're unified.
I've got a couple of written questions, but Saidul first.
How do Muslims in Britain work for Khilafah? That was the question. Yeah, the rest of it was introduction, but it's important. It's a good question because the important point first is to understand the duty. Don't let say I'm working for Khilafah become a slogan, yeah, a meaningless word. There's Muslims in Ummah say Quran Dasturana, and everybody says, Quran's Dastura. Quran is our constitution. Yeah, mashallah, it sounds good. What does it mean? Actually, it doesn't mean anything. It's meaningless. It sounds good, but it doesn't mean anything because it has no substance. There's nothing behind it. In fact, the same people, when you say, okay, Quran's your constitution, go ahead, implement the Quran constitution, they're like, and all the kufr comes in because they haven't got a clue what it meant. Don't let then exactly the same thing, I'm working for Khilafah, become a slogan which has no meaning. Meaning, understand exactly what it is that a Muslim in Britain can do to establish Khilafah. Because nobody really is expecting Khilafah to come in Britain. Nobody's honest for Khilafah in Britain, i.e. Khilafah will come back to Islam, to the dunya in Britain first. Nobody says that. Because that's nonsense. The work is in where the people are close to Islam, where Islam is their heritage, where the Islamic people, the people who had the Khilafah, lost it, it will come back to them inevitably. So the work in fact is happening in Iraq, the work in fact is happening in Egypt, it's happening in Turkey, it's happening in Muslim lands, in Pakistan, it's happening all across the Muslim lands. So I have to ask myself, in reality, is anybody in Turkey listening to Yahya? Does everybody say, Yahya, he's the one who's got the answer, I'm going to listen to him? To be honest with you, nobody is. I mentioned before, I lived in Egypt, nobody in Egypt wanted to listen to me. Everything I say, they used to say, mashallah, you're Muslim, do you know we fast in Islam? I've been Muslim 10 years then. They're still telling me, do you know we pray 5 times a day? They think they're teaching me the deen, alhamdulillah, they taught me a lot. But they take me as a complete nonsense, naive person. If I try to tell them anything about Egypt, about the politics, the situation, about Islam, they say, yeah, you don't understand. You don't know Egyptians like Egyptians do. You don't know our situation. And that's their belief. So in truth, in honesty, an Englishman can't guide an Egyptian man to Islam. They can't, because they just don't trust him enough. And in fact, an Egyptian man who lives in Britain can't guide an Egyptian who lives in Egypt to Islam, because they'll say to him, you don't know what we're suffering. It's all fine for you to sit on your couch in Britain, getting your free education. You don't know what we're going through. So in truth, I have no influence in that land. So that's where the work is. So I have to think then, how can I support the work in that land? Not how can I support the work here? Because otherwise, I'm just saying I'm working for Khilafah and it has no meaning, has no value. So I've got to make sure my actions are valuable. So the work that I do should have value to that. Now, there's certainly a lot of people here who come from those lands and are going back to those lands, or who have family in those lands, who will listen to those people. And I have access to those people. Sometimes I have access to more of these people than they do actually in the Muslim land, because it's very difficult to find somebody there. Whereas here, we're all living on the same streets. You can find somebody who lives in a palace in Pakistan. He comes here and he lives in a terraced house in London. When he visits his cousin here in London, and he's my neighbour. And I didn't realise you was a general. Oh, we didn't realise you consider yourself a prince. He's not a prince, but he considers himself of the upper elite classes. I can access people, I'm just saying, there's people I can meet here in Britain that I could never meet in Pakistan. And I have access to their minds in a way that I don't have access in Pakistan. Why? Because I access their families. So all I'm saying is the da'wah that we do is focused on the Muslim lands, yet it means that the work that I'm doing is actually here. I'm physically here, but I'm trying to set a mentality of ideas that will travel back over there. So that's an important point when it comes to this work to establish Khilafah. There's a second point though. We're not only charged with establishing Khilafah. That's not the only duty that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put on my shoulders. He put a lot of duties on my shoulders and on your shoulders. One of those duties is da'wah to the world. Da'wah to the world naturally comes when there's a state to call the people to Islam. But it doesn't only come that way. And it's wrong for us to say it's a precondition, that da'wah is not possible until the Khilafah exists. That's wrong. You have an ummah here in Britain, more than 3 million people. That's the last statistics. Maybe it's 4 now. 5. Allah knows best. There's a lot of million people in this country. And there's only 60 million people total. So we're talking like maybe, I don't know. You work out the mathematics. I can't do it in my head just like that. But it's a significant percentage. And if they were able to carry the deen confidently to non-Muslims in this country, you would start to see people really understanding the deen differently. At the moment, the Muslims are sitting back thinking, I can't possibly speak to those people at my workplace. I can't speak to my neighbours. They're never going to listen to me. They've just heard about this bombing and this thing and that atrocity. I'm afraid they're going to judge me badly. In fact, if I do speak to them, I'm going to lie to them. I'm going to tell them all kinds of lies about Islam to make it sound really appealing to them. Oh, no, in Islam it's okay. We don't really need to fast. I got imams of mosques in my area telling the head teachers of schools children don't have to pray. And he's saying because she's trying to ban the prayer from the year 10s and the year 11s. How many year 10s and year 11s are children? In Islam they're baligh, they're all adults. They all have to pray, and the imam is saying to the children don't have to pray. He's blatantly lying because he's afraid of what he fears is the fitna of opposing a local head teacher. So he has no confidence in Islam. So what can I do? I need to speak to these people, all the Muslims to show them how to speak to Islam, how to speak to non-Muslims about Islam. How are you going to present Islam to all of these people here? This Khilafah is going to come, and it's going to say to all you Muslims in Britain right now, tell all the people in Britain to become Muslim, give them da'wah. And all the people in Britain are like, huh? What? I don't know what to do, because they've got no experience. They may not even recognise who that Khalifa is. They say, who are you to tell me? These Britons, they've been looking after me. They give me sliced bread. What have you ever given me? Do you understand? So they need to prepare themselves that they need to be assets for the coming of Islam, the return of Islam, and not enemies of it. So actually you find our work here is about preparing the ummah to do the work which is going to be required of it when the Khilafah comes, and actually teaching them their deen so they stand up confidently and they don't start going on BBC and CNN and start spreading lies about Islam. Do you understand? So there's a lot of work to be done, but all I'm saying is be realistic. Have goals in your mind which are actually going to achieve the goals that we're looking for, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has set for us. So that means, akhdh bil asbab, that means tie the camel. At the same time, regardless of how much of this work, have hope and full hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to provide victory, regardless of how bad the odds look and difficult, it appears.
If you just read it out as well.
It says many Muslims are putting their hope in people and parties like Corbyn and Labour Party. Is this where Muslims should be placing their hope? No, obviously. Alhamdulillah. You know, if Corbyn was a plumber and he said, I'm going to come around and fix your... I've just had a flood in my cellar. We had a lot of rain. I don't know how it is up in Derby. You might get more rain than us. But when we get rain in London, that's it. The whole place floods. My cellar flooded yesterday. So if Corbyn was walking past my house and he says, you know what it is, I've got a pump, I'm going to pump out your cellar, I would have hope in him. Why? Because he's doing what he's supposed to do, and there's nothing wrong with employing Corbyn to be a plumber or use his pump to fix my thing. However, Corbyn has decided to be a politician, and Islam has something to say about politicians. Islam didn't tell us how to pump out our cellars and fix, broken pipes or whatever, floods and so on. Islam told us how to organize relationships between people. Islam told us how to, obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and live our lives according to Islam, not technicalities. So the issue of what Corbyn happens to dabble in is something which Islam has got a lot to say on. And so what he's offering is not Islam. So people say that Corbyn is better than May because she's really, really anti-Islamic and it's really obvious and she's really hateful of Islam and she comes out. But don't forget Corbyn, even though he doesn't say he hates Islam and he says he's got a few nice things to say about about Palestine and a few critical words to say about the Jews in Israel and the occupiers of Muslim lands, that doesn't make him our best friend. Because actually his vision, what he wants to, to solve the problems, because that's what politicians do, to solve problems, are absolutely not taken from Islam and are completely incompatible with Islam. So that is the main reason why Muslims must have no hope in somebody who's not offering them their deen. Regardless if he's the lesser of two evils or not as bad as the other person. Actually, he's not good either. Because if you're not offering Islam, you're not offering anything. If you're only offering more misguidance or a different kind of misguidance, it's all misguidance. It's not good. So it's actually pointless. But there's another point here to make, is that these elections, they're a bit of they're a distraction. And sometimes, a lot of Muslims, a few activists amongst the Muslims get very excited by them, thinking this is our one opportunity to make a real difference. And they put all of their hope in this one election, because it comes once every 5 or every couple of years, depending on whether they call snap elections or not. And it means that what they're saying is that I will disassociate myself from all politics for all of the time, except for at this one time I'm going to vote for one party and I'm going to encourage lots of Muslims to get voting, because I think it's going to make a difference. Whereas if they understood what is required of them, they're supposed to be involved in the politics all the time, because there's a lot of oppression happening every day from both of these parties. And somebody needs to stand up and say the truth, and tell the people the correct way, which is Islam, and tell them what they should have been doing instead of what they're actually doing. So it means that Muslims have got to resist the urge to get distracted by this nonsense, this Westminster sideshow, and say politics has got nothing to do with Westminster. Politics is what happens every day in your street. Politics is what happens every day in your daily lives. And we've got something to say in what's happening every day in our daily lives. Islam has a solution to every problem. So Muslims need to be presenting the solutions to all of the people all the time, and by that way they're involved in politics. And say these people, who aren't real politicians in fact, they're only professional politicians, when they're out of office they're doing virtually nothing good for the people, so they're virtually abstainers from politics. So this is the kind of way I would say we need to look at this issue.
Shazad.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
So, how should we see these challenges, and how should that then play our people?
Yeah, so I don't want to say the wrong thing by saying that in a way we do deserve what's happening. If we do in fact give up on the deen, what do you expect is going to happen? What comes around goes around, they say. But that's not a nonsense statement, that's reality. If I slap you, and I slap you, and I slap you, one day you're going to slap me back. Perhaps he won't because he's muttaqi. But Allah knows best. But that's the way things happen, isn't it? If you're rude to people, people are going to be rude to you. So it is true that the Muslims are the ones who have caused this problem for themselves. But at the same time, we're the ones who hold the solution. So the important thing is to understand the reality as it is. Yes, we are the ones who left Islam on the side, and Allah tells us if we do that, we're going to live a restricted, constricted life. That's the reality. However, we have that choice to be able to choose and pick it up again. So whilst we put Islam there, we can pick it up at any time. Whilst we are the ones who allowed ourselves to become despairing and hopeless and not to have any hope, we're the ones who can pick it up and start to see hope again. If we only choose the Islamic Aqidah to be our guiding light, if we choose to look at things through the lens of Islam rather than this despairing, hopeless lens. So we are the ones who hold the key to change, as well as we're the ones who can sit back and allow the lack of change to continue to persist. We could sit back and watch the dhulm get worse and worse, or we could pick ourselves up rather and actually make the change. That's the choice we have. Do you see? So yeah, it is affected by how we see the situation, by whether we see that we have a responsibility. Responsibility in the cause as well as a responsibility in the solution. And in fact, we have a responsibility in both.
Inshallah. We've got enough time for last question. Riz?
Alaykum salam.
The situation we're in now, where we saw recently the Manchester bombing, and just before that, we saw and all these situations across Europe. Situations becoming where the Muslims have questioned themselves, and question the people around them, that it's actually our fault. So we are the ones who do these things. There's so many people are doing the acts or the these that we get that going on. The result is the backlash. So we finally, for example, get increased legislation from Muslims, increased scrutiny, and that sort of, watching over us, that increased sort of reporting of anybody who is even thinking about doing something like that, or this sort of extremism agenda that we have. So in a way, we're almost causing that on ourselves. So I think the question is, finally, we need to have hope, and not sort of despair so much, because then the situation becomes, almost like a deadlock. How far can you go with that? When is it becoming difficult to even live in this country and live across Europe when these kind of things are constantly going on? And you talk about GDP, you talk about CNM, but more than that, it's the whole government arm and machinery in this country that are sort of really,
I mean, there's another point you raised here. The issue of the difficulty living in this country. Just show me another country which isn't difficult, and isn't becoming more difficult. There isn't a place on this planet today. Muslims actually don't have a place to run to, which is why, the thought of running away, it doesn't make sense, because you can't go anywhere where you're going to be. And actually, it's kind of a selfish solution. The whole ummah is suffering today, and we're saying we're just going to leave them to suffer and do nothing about it. So that shouldn't be an option. If we make a move, we should move because we feel we're going to do something more there than we can do here. We see an opportunity rather than trying to escape a threat. Having said that, these, you will always find some people who are going to lose hope and have such despair that they will do something very, very extreme or radical or whatever word you want to use to describe it, something very, very strange, which seems completely beyond all limits of reason, and it doesn't seem to have any bearing or any benefit to solving the problem. Blowing up people, children even, at a concert, has got nothing to do with solving the problems in the Muslim world. Stabbing people, or even one policeman or two, or crashing cars into people on bridges, what has that got to do with ending colonialism? It isn't going to do that. And even if people try to stretch it and it's got nothing to do with it. So part of the message is saying, anybody who's thinking along those lines, and it might be 1, 2, 20, 30 people in the ummah, who think along these very strange lines. People who have mental diseases, frankly, who've become so depressed and so lack of hope. And they've misunderstood it so badly that they don't think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even has a solution. So they're not even looking for Allah's solution. So they listen to all kinds of waswasa and all kinds of, bad advice and misguidance to take them to very strange things. However, we don't want to be a naive ummah as well. Let's not, there's one or two, if you really know somebody who is telling you, I'm really thinking putting a suicide vest, I think it's a great idea. There's one thing to speak to him about hope, speak to him from the Quran, remind him of his aqeedah, remind him of his responsibility and how haram it is what he's thinking of doing, of the great harm he's going to do to the ummah, let alone, the suffering he's going to have on the qiyamah. Remind him to come back to his deen, and don't think this is a religious action. But more, but there's something else there. He said, don't be a naive fool. Don't think that you are actually helping the ummah, you are helping the kuffar. They invented this whole entire, narrative that Muslims are these violent extremists who blow people up. We never did this in the 80s and the 90s. The Muslim ummah was not characterized by this kind of activity until the colonialists came and started doing it and blaming us for it, quite frankly. We caught a few of them in Pakistan doing it. We caught them in Algeria doing it, creating murders and then blaming the Muslims. It's a well-known tactic that they're doing. And Allah knows best whether some Muslims have been naively fooled into doing this, or been threatened into doing this, or been blamed innocently of doing this. We don't know any of these details. And quite frankly, the people who are telling us that they've caught them red-handed are not to be trusted anyway. They're the most untrustworthy people. But it's the same people who are telling us this other narrative, which is the real motivation, is that it is only because they became more religious, that they came closer to their deen, that they started to think about doing these things. When the reality is, it's only because they stopped listening to people who are teaching them their deen, they got in with the wrong crowd, which has got nothing to do with the deen, that they started to contemplate doing these things. That is the reality of it. That people who get into their deen don't start to do these things. Why? Because it's got nothing to do with our deen. This isn't a legitimate solution from Islam. So they're using this as a pressure. The media don't listen to the fact that, quite honestly, people are saying, what has a guy driving a car on Westminster Bridge got anything to do with Islam? He didn't even leave one of these so-called suicide note videos. He didn't claim it had anything to do with Islam. He just happened to be a convert to Islam. What does that got to do with anything? Suddenly it's described as terror. Suddenly it's described as, now we have to put more restrictions on the Muslim community in this country. And we have to put pressure on Muslims to not only disassociate themselves from the act, that's easy, but disassociate themselves from Islam. That's the problem. They're trying to say that our aqeedah has led him to that. Actually, our aqeedah, if it's understood correctly, will never lead a person to do that. Our aqeedah, our sharia, if it's understood, will never lead a person to do this nonsense. Because it's got nothing to do with our sharia. It will focus their mind on doing productive work, which has got something to do with actually changing the situation in the world and exposing the real oppressors. So in a way, our message has to be, resist this pressure upon us to change our deen and give up on our deen. At the same time, we're not making excuses for people who get involved and do crazy things. But you show me 10 so-called terrorists, I'll show you 100 nutters who've murdered people in Britain when they were drunk, when they got nothing to do with Islam. People who beat up their wives just because they got a drinking problem. People who kill their own children just because they want revenge upon their wife who cheated on them or something like that. Come on. People are doing this stuff as well, but nobody says, look at the mentality, look at the thinking, look at the aqeedah, look at the freedoms that he feels he has. It's a double-edged sword. That's all I'm saying, is we need to be careful not to give up on our deen because somebody puts pressure on us. No, hold on to your deen, and actually that is the way for the youth and all of the people to stay away from getting involved in these negative forces, whether it's ISIS, whether it's becoming agents of the kuffar, whether it's doing all kinds of rubbish in the name of Islam, which actually we have nothing to do with us.
Okay, Jazakallah khair. I know there's a few brothers wanting to ask some questions. However, we have run out of time. We've gone over by 10 minutes. So I'm going to ask Brother Yahya to finish with dua, and then anyone who has got outstanding questions can probably stay behind and ask those or make these comments, inshallah.
ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على قوم الكافرين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر.